And so we went for the 32-week ultrasound, and this is where things got a little complicated. Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. So today I wanted to talk about my pregnancy story. As you may know, we were originally to give birth at a birth center. Sadly, that didn't work out. So my pregnancy started out okay. I did have pregnancy symptoms right away before I even had a positive test, before my missed period, before everything. I started to have pregnancy symptoms, nausea, all kinds of symptoms. I don't even remember all of them exactly, but I remember Googling my symptoms and I was like, okay, this really might be that I'm pregnant. And I was gaining a ton of weight. In the first trimester, I gained about 10 pounds. And then in the second, I gained about another 20. And then in the third, I gained another 30 pounds. So I gained a total of like 60, 62, 63 pounds by the time I gave birth. So yeah, that was a lot. That's not fun. So originally it was not very eventful. I did have one incident when for some reason I decided to check my cervix, and I was actually using the family awareness method for contraception before. So I would take my temperature every morning, and also you had to take like check your cervix, check your cervical mucus and things like that. And so when I was about 20 weeks pregnant, I decided to check my cervix, and it felt very soft and as if it was like opened like 1 centimeter, like I could fit in an index finger into the opening. And of course I freaked out because that's exactly how an incompetent cervix presents. And so I called the midwives immediately, and they referred me for an ultrasound, and thankfully everything was fine. I did not have a short cervix. It just was soft and kind of open at the bottom of it, but it was actually quite long. And here at the top where the baby's, like where closer to the baby, was closed. So thankfully everything was fine. And then I think at 24 weeks you have your last ultrasound. The ultrasound paper, like the results just said like, oh, we recommend a 32-week ultrasound just like to see what's up, just, you know, it was a recommendation, not really like a requirement or anything. And there wasn't really any reason to do it, but I was like, oh, I would prefer to do it just to be sure, just to be safe, just to know that everything's fine with the baby, and to see what size she is. And so we went for the 32-week ultrasound, and this is where things got a little complicated. At 32 weeks, they measured that I had way too much amniotic fluid around the baby. So they diagnosed me with polyhydramnios, and they were trying to figure out the cause of it. So polyhydramnios is a condition where you have too much amniotic fluid around the baby, and the baby does not engage in the cervix. And also because there's so much water, there can be placental abruption, which is when placenta separates from you and the baby can die. There can be, the water can break and the cord can prolapse and the baby can die. So there's a lot of dangers to the baby, and you can lose it basically at any point. Several things that could be causing it. One of them is something's wrong with the baby. And so they were checking the kidneys, they were checking lungs, they were checking bladder and the stomach. And so they said that one of the causes of polyhydramnios is that the baby is not intaking fluid, and that's why there is too much fluid. But he looked up on the ultrasound that she was like inhaling fluid, basically. I mean, like swallowing fluid and inhaling, and so he was not too worried. but he basically said you need to have another ultrasound at 34 weeks and then another one at 36 weeks to see the amount of fluid and everything. And I was getting really big, and I was having a lot of trouble like sitting and laying down, sleeping. Like I was having trouble breathing because there was so much fluid around. We were still with the midwives, but with the birth center, but they said that if this condition persists, we will have to transfer to the hospital to our backup doctors. And so in the end, I had an ultrasound at 34 weeks, nothing has changed. I still had too much fluid, and then at 36 weeks, and the amount of fluid had actually increased. And so the midwife said, okay, there's no way you can deliver at the birth center. And so we were transferred to the hospital. And at the hospital, they told us that the doctors there said that with polyhydramnios, there is a risk of water breaking on its own, and I mean that's normal, but there is a risk that the cord will fall out because there's too much fluid and the baby is not against the cervix, so the cord can it's called cord prolapse, and then the baby can die in like minutes basically because they're not getting the oxygen because the cord is compressed and like has fallen out through the cervix. And the baby was surrounded by so much water that she was not like engaged in the cervix. And so we were transferred to the hospital for care, and they started doing twice a week non-stress tests for the baby and twice a week measurement of amniotic fluid. And then I continued having ultrasounds basically weekly. And so the non-stress test is where they strap you to like a monitor. They strap the baby to the monitor and they monitor her for like I think 30 minutes, and they need to see like several like spikes in heartbeat, and that tells them that baby's fine, the baby's happy. And so every week this would happen twice a week. I think once was on Monday and the second time was Mondays and Thursdays. And so they basically said that we need to induce you because the baby was really large. The baby was in the like 98th percentile and it was very large around the belly, so they were afraid that she would get stuck, like the shoulders would get stuck during delivery, and there was too much fluid and there was a risk of cord prolapse. And so we started picking dates of induction, and we picked the date that was a Wednesday, and on Monday I had another non-stress test. And on Monday when I came in, they did the ultrasound and it showed that the baby was breech, and so now induction was no longer an option, and they were basically gonna schedule me for a C-section. And this was something I absolutely did not want. This has escalated so quickly. We went from a natural, no medication, birth center birth plan or birth hope to like a C-section at the hospital. And I was of course freaking out, and the C-section was the last thing I wanted. I really wanted to have a vaginal birth. I wanted to have a vaginal delivery. I did not want to deal with all the complications that can come from a C-section, and I was just completely in shock that I was gonna have a C-section. And so comes Wednesday, and we come into the hospital and we say, okay, we have a C-section scheduled, and they take you to the triage room. And at the triage room, they were like, okay, we'll do a quick ultrasound to see the position of the baby. And they checked the position and she was no longer breech. And I was ecstatic, but they were like, oh, okay, you can go home now. I'm like, no. We have a C-section scheduled, but before the C-section we had an induction scheduled. And they were like, oh, we don't schedule induction this early. I was like, well, my doctor scheduled it. Like, so they called the doctor and basically they started to admit us for an induction. So this was my pregnancy story up until birth. I will film a birth story and include some footage from birth. I hope you enjoyed this video. Please give this video a thumbs up if you like it. And please subscribe to my channel below, and I'll see you back in the next video. Bye.